Outputting our coverage. It's what we do.
That's all we do every Thursday
At 5:30.
College football.
Mountain West Conference.
Doesn't matter.
SEC
Is all that matters.
Nick Saban
Is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's all. Let's start the show.
Good evening, faithful Outputting Our Coverage listeners. We are back as usual, as not usual, since we are recording here on a different day, and only our most hardcore listeners are listening in live.
I mean, you would just have to have your finger on the pulse of Outputting Our Coverage.
Yes,
So
which
closely
many
to
people
know that we're
do.
doing this.
But coincidentally, tonight's show being recorded in front of a live semi-studio audience and one canine, so we will try as hard as we can to keep them as quiet as possible, which you know how that tends to go.
You can't
on this
control
show.
any of them.
Yes,
I can tell you.
We'll see what we can do with that. As usual, the games are for the most part over, but we still have good calls and bad calls to talk about from last week.
We do.
We have one really bad call that we're taking a team bad call this week. We'll get to that in a second.
We'll say that. How about good calls? You want to start with good calls?
Good call. I'm going to go with Oklahoma for my good call.
Pretty good call.
Had some pretty good Big 12 matchups, as we mentioned last week. The Big 12 with 10 teams playing a round-robin schedule now, so they have 9 conference games, which means you actually get some decent games the last week of the season. Oklahoma playing TCU. TCU not where they are most years in terms of being elite. This is their first year in the Big 12, kind of getting used to that level of competition. But once again, Oklahoma turns in a really, really good but not spectacular season. I mean,
Right.
It's just kind of the norm for them now.
Well, yeah, and they only beat TCU by 7, and
Right.
you would think that they would kind of clobber them with the year TCU's have, but they did win.
Yeah.
They kind of got snubbed out of BCS Bowl, but
They
that's
did.
something we'll talk about later, I'm
They
sure.
definitely got snubbed out of a BCS Bowl. But, Oklahoma, one of those teams that it's kind of hard to put your finger on them because,
They were pretty terrible at the
knows?
beginning of the year.
yeah, I mean, who knows how good they really were. They don't play in that great of a conference. It's just how it is.
Right.
So
I guess my good call is going to be Tulsa over Central Florida. Did not look good for Tulsa early. UCF jumped out to, I think it was like a 10, 14-point lead. So was kind of shaking a little bit on that one, but they came back. They were respectable, 33-27. So
yeah, it was a great game. I mean, probably second in ratings to only one game last weekend. It's just
yeah.
a top matchup there.
It was
so.
pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Did you watch that one all the way through?
Oh yeah, of course. I watch every game on the Big Ten all the way through.
You know, we were in Nashville, and it was just on all of the TVs.
Yeah.
We couldn't look away from it.
Usually is. All right, go ahead and give your bad call as well, since we're taking a team bad call.
My bad call, personally, is going to be Rutgers. I went away from my preseason pick, Louisville, the Darlings, and I picked against them, and sure enough, they show up, win by 3.
I can't believe you went against them, man. I had a feeling. I just knew. I knew that Charlie Strong was going to be sticking around for the long term at that time before everyone else did.
And it just rejuvenated
And,
the
yes,
entire program.
That's exactly what happened. I'm not going to take a personal bad call just because I want to make sure and throw all of my bad call eggs into this one basket because it was that bad of a call.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is our team bad call. Nebraska, what the crap.
Oh, yeah, that was
I
just
mean,
terrible. How about
come on.
laying an egg? Now, we were joined by 12 of our listeners in
Yes.
picking Nebraska.
And
so
probably for good reason. I mean, if you look at the records, look at Wisconsin, what they did early in the season, you're pretty justified in taking Nebraska as a pretty solid choice there. But
you would think so.
wow, it's tough to say really what's gone on at Nebraska there. For a while, it seemed like they were getting back to where they had been at one point, but you just have to wonder if a team like Nebraska that doesn't really have any traditional recruiting area, so to speak,
Right.
not a whole lot of great players in their area. At one time, great players wanted to go to Nebraska to play for coaches like Tom Osborne, run the option. They don't really have that anymore.
They don't. They do still run an option. It's out of more of a shotgun, but they don't have that one offense
Right,
that
they're
only
not
Nebraska
unique,
has.
so,
Exactly.
They've really kind of lost their competitive advantage. It seems like things would be easier for them since they play in the Big Ten, but they were not even able to take advantage of that.
It's because they're terrible.
Yeah.
So.
And now you have an 8-4 team going to the Rose Bowl.
No, 7-5.
7-5.
Yeah,
Wow,
they
that's
had
terrible.
5 losses going to the
Terrible.
Rose Bowl.
And without their coach, which we will talk about
We will.
Here in a little bit.
I think we need to break tradition a little bit. We're going to talk about the standings now just because it's over.
It's done.
The Pick 10 is done.
Thankfully, just like Auburn's season, it's done.
Right. We're going to crown a champion.
Us.
So during the week, Drewby Snack won the final pick'em. He won in a tiebreak with an 8-2 record with Antica, Bama Fan, and actually, surprisingly, Andy. You went 8-2 this week.
I came on strong late.
You did. The problem with that is that I went 7-3, and you only gained a game.
So just wasn't enough.
Down at the bottom, we've got people like the Swamp Thing, Sports Illiterate, and Max 2011. He had a pretty tough week. However,
he was coasting. He was resting the starters.
He was resting the starters.
Didn't have to worry about it.
If he had tried just a little harder and gotten one more win,
yeah.
You know how many he would have had?
Would have had 100.
Would have had 100. So,
but he's got to wait till next year now.
He's got to wait till next year. He finished the season 99-41. So
wow.
Really impressive season. There has been a little controversy. Max 2011, as some of you have figured out, is my father-in-law. It was not rigged. I'm not sure how you could rig something like that, but he picked him straight up. So,
well, full disclosure, I am the commissioner of this pick'em, so
this is true.
I would not have allowed something like that to occur.
And speaking of the commissioner, he finished in 12th place, all by himself. At least you own 12th place. You're not sharing it with anybody.
Yeah.
I'm sharing 9th place with Charm City Auburnite and BT Perkins. The top, again, we have Max 2011. Ribeye really kind of snuck in there at the end with some good weeks. Garrett Burke dropped to 3rd. Drewby Snack jumped up into 4th with a tie for Bama Fan 1. He just kind of fell off in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Trying to get that number 1 spot, got a little greedy.
Sad story, really.
So, but anyway, pick 10. A lot of you are wondering, what's the prize for Max 2011? You just heard it.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Wonderful. But I'm just glad I don't have to take the Shiva or the Sacco home. I would take the Shiva.
You would take the Shiva. Everybody would take the Shiva.
Don't have to have the Sacco.
Right. If you don't know what that is, please go to the internet and find it because
yes.
It's well worth it.
Go to the internet. It can't be that far away from you. We will mention it now. We'll mention it a little bit later as well. Whether you wanted to or not, you have already been imported into the official Outputting Our Coverage Bowl Pick'em Challenge, brought to you by the Kraft Fight Hunger Bowl.
I'm so excited about that one. Does San Diego State Credit Union still have a bowl?
I don't know. How could they not? They're just, such a...
Well, they have money coming in from everywhere.
Yeah, so... That's coming up around the corner. It is already up and running. You can go ahead and make your selections now if you so feel. But yeah, we'll mention that a little bit later on in the show as well. Just wanted to let you know it's out there waiting for you. So
I'm excited.
Yes, I know you're out there waiting for us to come back at our next segment. We're going to talk about a certain game that happened in Atlanta this past weekend.
Maybe a couple people saw it.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of a sideshow for some other things that were going on. Some of the other games.
Right.
But we'll break that one down. Talk about it here on the other side of Outputting Our Coverage. It's time for SEC preview. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, can't count. SEC, college football robber barons. SEC, yeah, they're big, they're fast, they're strong.
And Missouri and Texas A&M as well.
Yeah, SEC preview.
Here we go.
It's time for SEC preview. We are back. Now that I remembered to turn on the microphone.
Hey.
As I was saying to our live studio audience, which is a little bonus feature for them that they got to hear, we're very sad here on Outputting Our Coverage that there are no more SEC games to preview. Well, I guess technically
we have a review.
Yeah, there are bowl games remaining, of course, but we got the SEC review talking about the SEC championship game, Alabama and Georgia. Unlike normal SEC championships, which turn into either snooze fests or big blowouts or a combination of the two. This is one of the better games I've seen.
I've got to say, I think this SEC championship game, best SEC championship game I've seen since I've been alive. What do you think?
I think so too. I mean, I can't remember another one that was really that good. I think the SEC championship between Auburn and Tennessee in 2004 was decent.
Right, but it they ran away with it there.
Yeah, Tennessee kind of got an early lead, and then Auburn came back. But in terms of back and forth, just a great game. I think you're definitely right.
And the first half, maybe not that exciting, kind of feeling each other out. Not a lot of scoring either. But the second half, I mean, they were just throwing the punches.
Yeah, that sounds like you describing a 16-year-old couple's first date in a movie theater. What you just said there. That was... Sorry, I don't know where my mind is tonight, but...
I think we've got that area of the show covered.
Yes, I think we're good. That was our one offensive comment for the week, by the way. But, yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised. I thought Georgia would keep it close, but I really didn't think that they would be able to sustain the type of offensive attack that they did. I thought maybe they could have some success early with the running game, but then Kirby Smart and Alabama would figure it out and shut it down. But really, both of these offenses were able to run pretty much wherever and whenever they wanted to for most of the game.
And they did. Alabama definitely did. I mean, 2 backs in the 175-plus range. That was pretty impressive. But you still kind of question why they were throwing there in the game when they're having that much success running the ball. Georgia, though, did they expose enough for Notre Dame to make this a game? I mean, Alabama's defense looked pretty weak at times.
They did. The thing about Notre Dame is I'm not sure that they have the same caliber of rushing threat that Georgia does. I mean,
they've got a very good offensive line and defensive line. I mean, that's one thing that Kelly did when he came in. He really established the line on both sides of the ball.
We don't want to digress into the championship too much, but I think Notre Dame will provide a better matchup for Alabama than a lot of people realize.
Right.
But overall, I don't think Notre Dame has the talent that Georgia did, which we've talked a lot this year about how talented Georgia's defense was, and at times they just weren't able to put it all together.
Right.
And I think maybe you saw a little bit of that in this game. You had some very talented players, but at times it seemed like they were out of position. And then in the second half, once Alabama decided to be smart and start running the ball, Georgia's defensive line and really their whole front seven just were getting pushed around. They
just absolutely nothing they could do.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it is. Like you say, you got to question the first half play calling decisions by Alabama a little bit, why they're trying to get cute, if you will, and throw the ball
and not calling timeouts towards the end of the half wasting. You get the ball 1st and goal from the 5, and you have to kick a field goal.
I mean that's a rare tactical mistake for Nick Saban. He is human as well, I guess. So, but really, you gotta hate it for Georgia. They're so close. I mean, this is the closest they've been to the championship game in a very, very long time.
Not even going to a BCS game.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a little bit, this whole situation with the BCS games. But obviously a huge faux pas there at the end of the game, not spiking the ball.
It's just terrible. I understand you're trying to get the defense off guard. That was the kind of whole mindset going in. Rush down there. They're not set. You get to run a play. Makes sense if you're going to run the ball and then save your timeout and try to get in when they're not set. But they throw a ball up in the back of the end zone and just never really had a chance.
Yeah, so some questionable decisions there on Georgia's part, but you got to hand it to them. Georgia, they played above my expectations. I think I was expecting a little bit more than you were based on what we talked about last week, but I wasn't expecting them to play quite that well.
Right.
So
and you have to tip your hat.
Yeah, certainly a good season for Georgia. We'll talk about a little bit later in the show some SEC teams going to bowl games. Of course, there's been a lot of debate about Florida and Georgia, which one should have gone to the BCS. Florida got the nod. We'll talk about our feelings on that one here in a little bit. But believe it or not, there were some coaches hired this past week.
A lot of coaches hired. Did you know that every SEC opening that existed last week no longer exists? All of them were filled.
Has now been filled. We're going to make you wait just a little bit longer to hear our thoughts on that one. On the other side of outputting our coverage, we'll be right back. We are back here on Outputting Our Coverage. Obviously, the biggest news of the week dominating the headlines, all of the coaching carousel moves that have occurred. 4 SEC jobs were open: Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Auburn. Kentucky jumped on first, hiring Mark Stoops, formerly the defensive coordinator at Florida State. Your thoughts on that one?
Great hire. Yeah. I think probably the best person that they could have hoped for, and it was great that they went out and got him early before he got scooped up.
Definitely good work there by Kentucky, I think, and probably a good place for Mark Stoops as well. He can probably win 7, maybe 7 games is probably good for him, and Kentucky will be happy with that.
Oh, yeah, definitely, especially if their basketball team's doing well.
Yeah, and work himself up into a better opening. Arkansas, kind of a surprise hire.
Nobody saw this one coming, getting Brett Bielema from Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think maybe the more you look at it, the more it makes sense as to Brett Bielema's motivations. He's been in Wisconsin since 2006, I believe, when Barry Alvarez retired. They've been good. They've made a lot of Rose Bowls, but being good in the Big Ten is not enough. You can't get yourself into the top games just by winning the Big Ten. So.
No, and he kind of saw the end of the road with his 7-5 season, and also having the Ohio State with a perfect season. He sees what Urban Meyer's coming in. Penn State did not drop off nearly as much as we thought they would with all the sanctions and whatnot, so he probably got out when he could. Although he went from the Big Ten to the SEC, so he should not expect any lesser competition.
Yeah, now let's talk about it from the Arkansas perspective. Do you think this is a good hire for them?
I think so. I think Bielema has had tons of success recruiting in the Texas and even in some of the Arkansas area.
That might be how he pronounces it. I don't know.
I really love this live audience. So I typically don't get this many laughs on our show.
I know.
But, he's had a lot of success there. He's got like 12 of his past Badger players are from Florida, so he can recruit in the South. I think this is good for them. He's also going to kind of try to reestablish the downhill run that hasn't been at Arkansas for a while. So I think he could have success.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of unsure at this point as far as how good of a hire that might be for them. I talked about this in a blog post on our outputtingourcoverage.wordpress.com blog this week. I think maybe the recruiting thing worked for him at Wisconsin. He was able to get some guys from Florida and Texas, some guys that would be maybe a little bit above average players in the SEC, but when you put those players in the Big Ten, they're pretty good. I mean, he's able to have success with that, but I just don't know if there's enough truly elite line players on both offensive and defensive sides to try to establish the type of football that Bielema wants to play at Wisconsin for him to be able to compete with, Alabama, LSU, the other elite SEC teams.
And that's true. He's going to have the facilities to show off. He's going to have their recent success, if you can forget this season, to kind of show off. He's going to be able to show his own record to some of these recruits. Will it be enough? We'll just have to kind of wait around and see. But I think that his strategy can be put in place and work to get him 7 wins for the first couple years.
Yeah.
You can get in there and you can beat everybody who you're supposed to, maybe surprise a couple people in SEC play, and he can keep that job and maybe even get a couple more recruits so that he can be good later. If not, it could be, Arkansas could be looking in another 2-3 years in the same position.
Yeah, and the tough thing is that he really doesn't have exactly the type of players right now to run his offense. Most of the players who are still at Arkansas were there for Bobby Petrino's scheme, which is not quite as true spread as some of the other spreads that are out there.
Right.
But still, he placed an emphasis on throwing the ball. Obviously, some really good wide receiver talent there. I'm not sure that you have multiple elite running backs, the type of run-blocking offensive linemen that he's used to. So.
And that's true. It is a completely different style. But let me ask you a question and get your opinion on this. I really think that as a nation we've kind of put Arkansas's talent level down at a level where maybe it doesn't deserve. How much do you think the way Arkansas's season rode out was due to the fact of how bad they did rather than the talent level that they had? Do you think it was emotions or do you think it was talent?
I don't think Arkansas has the talent level of an LSU or Alabama, obviously.
No.
But I think Arkansas probably has better talent than any Big Ten team other than maybe you can make a case for somebody like Ohio State or something like that. But
does Arkansas have better talent than Tennessee?
That's a tough call.
It's
I put them about even.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell because of the way their seasons went. So I just think that's something interesting to throw
obviously,
out there.
a lot of it was the fact that John L. Smith, the craziest old man in the SEC, was coaching them.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's got to be a lot of the reason.
You could tell they had given up. After the UL Monroe game, Arkansas was done for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and, I can't blame him. You're playing for a one and done head coach. I mean, that's if you know there's going to be a change, just like Auburn's players. If you know there's going to be a change, how hard are you going to try, knowing that the rest of the season really doesn't matter anyway?
Right, and that's true. But I think we're going to see a lot better things out of Arkansas than maybe some people would expect. Yeah. I expect them back at 7 or 8 wins next year.
I think they can be a solid 7 or 8 win team. I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem for them. But Arkansas, they tasted some really high levels of success with Petrino.
Right,
and they're hungry for that, and I'm not sure that Bielema was the guy to get them back to that.
Especially not in the conference they're in. It's going to be tough over the next couple years.
Maybe they should look at moving conferences. Everybody else is doing it.
That's true.
So really, one of the things I mentioned on the blog was that you almost see the SEC West in particular splitting into 2 camps now. And I am coining the phrases Sabanization and anti-Sabanization.
I like it. So we'll see that in economy books before too long.
Absolutely, yeah. So Arkansas obviously trying to Sabanize to an extent. I mean, they're not. Bielema is not Saban. They're not the exact same guys.
And by that, you're talking about down the hill, powerful running, ball control, and good defense.
Yes, yeah. So anything that would not be considered a spread, I guess I'm lumping into the Sabanization category. Whereas Auburn, on the other hand, has decided to anti-Sabanize, going back with Gus Malzahn. I don't know if you wouldn't call it a surprise hire. A lot of Auburn fans, I think, were disappointed. Well, not a lot, but a vocal minority of Auburn fans were disappointed that Bobby Petrino really didn't get a fair shake in this one, didn't even get interviewed, really. I'm kind of glad that I don't have to make that moral decision within myself of whether or not you would have supported him. Gus Malzahn, my initial thoughts on him, I was a little bit underwhelmed, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like a safe hire for Auburn, which he is. I mean, if you look at Auburn's coaching hires in the past, most of the time they go with somebody who's familiar. Obviously, Gene Chizik was a defensive coordinator at Auburn, a very good one at the time. Gus Malzahn had some great success as offensive coordinator at Auburn, but you see it time and time again, the Auburn leadership places a lot of emphasis on people who get Auburn, whatever that means.
They're kind of like how Michigan was before in always hiring a Michigan man.
Right.
I mean, Auburn's pretty much kind of turned into that.
And it can be a good thing or a bad thing. I think in short term, if you look at it in that perspective, Gus Malzahn has the best chance of probably any of the coaches that they brought in of getting things back on the right track next year, just because a lot of the players that are already there, offensively fit into his system. And
came for him. Most
of them came for him. And a lot of people forget that after the 2010 season, people were kind of jokingly saying that we should go ahead and name Gus Malzahn our head coach in waiting, which was kind of a hot trend at the time, I guess, because I think people really felt at that time that Malzahn was really the one responsible for a lot of that success. Chizik certainly gets credit for hiring him, but people didn't give Chizik a whole lot of credit for that season. And really, I think the relationship between Auburn fans and Malzahn may have soured a little bit during 2011 when things kind of slipped back offensively, especially later in the season. But the more and more you look at it now and things are coming out, it sounds like that was not really Malzahn's choice to slow the offense down. Chizik had a lot of hand in that. So for better or worse, Malzahn, he's the guy in charge now. There's going to be nobody there to tell him to slow down the offense. He's getting to do things his way. So if nothing else, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I think so. I just like this topic because I know we disagree so completely on it. I thought Petrino was not the right guy for Auburn from the start. I think Malzahn's going to be an okay hire. I think he just keeps enough of the fan base happy for a couple years. It's going to be okay. I think Malzahn really, out of all these coaches, probably has the potential to be out quicker than anybody else, because if it does not work after the first year or two, especially if it's bad next year, he could be out in a year. I thought the best candidate, if they could have gotten him, was Charlie Strong. Of course, nobody could have foreseen Louisville jumping into the ACC and then being willing to pay him all that money to stay. But I really think that Auburn's focus needs to be on the defense. I think the offense is really going to pick up. It's going to get them some steam. But if they cannot get that defense worked out, it doesn't matter what the offense is doing. They've got to get a focus back on the defense. So it'll be really interesting to see who they hire as coordinators and get set up there.
Well, I already have answers for you on that one. Auburn, Gus Malzahn moving very quickly, just like his offense, to hire his coordinators. He started out one day after he was hired, bringing in Ellis Johnson, former South Carolina defensive coordinator, and also head coach of Southern Miss last year in a disastrous experiment.
Oh, they were terrible.
Going 0-12. Not the first time he's been a head coach. He was also a head coach at some small school in North Carolina. That one was a disaster too. So
some people are great coordinators, right, terrible coaches.
He's an excellent coordinator. Ironically, when Auburn played South Carolina, where he was defensive coordinator at the time in 2010, Johnson made some pretty disparaging comments about Malzahn's offense, calling it gimmicky and some other things. And he said in a press conference today, of course you know the press is going to bring that one up. He said, I think if you translate that into Latin, it means we could not stop that.
Right. So
I think it's a good hire. I'm kind of waiting to see who they might bring in as assistants. A big news coming today, Auburn will not be retaining Trooper Taylor, and after that news came out, 5-star commitment linebacker Reuben Foster decommitting. So
what is he going to do with that tattoo?
I don't know. That's that was one of the top stories on Yahoo Sports. Picture of his tattoo. He's an 18-year-old. Those kids change their mind, so I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him come back in. But you got to think long term here. You can't be focused on a couple of defensive recruits.
And honestly, I don't know how big of a loss that is for Auburn. He has not had the senior year that everybody expected him to have.
Right.
He had 4 games this year where he had 2 tackles.
Right. So, and Trooper Taylor, on the other hand, he's brought in some good recruits for Auburn, but I think Auburn fans would do well to remember that last year, it doesn't matter how many great players you supposedly have, if nobody's there to coach them, you're going to go 3-9.
That's right. You have to have developers and recruiters.
Right. You got to have some of both. On the offensive side of the ball, Malzahn has brought in Rhett Lashley, a 29-year-old offensive coordinator. But Malzahn has mentioned that he's probably going to be the ones calling the plays. Lashley was a quarterback for Malzahn at high school when Malzahn was head coach. He's been with him pretty much everywhere he's been.
Understands the system.
Right. He's kind of a secretary, if you will, to Malzahn. So I'm not too worried about that one, but a lot of it's going to depend on position coaches, especially on the defensive side. They got to have some guys who can get in there and teach some good technique.
Right. So you want to talk about Tennessee after this break?
Yeah, we'll take a quick break. Talk about Tennessee on the other side here on Outputting Our Coverage. Back.
Studio audience-less.
Yes, studio audience-less. They decided they had finally had enough of our just supremely intelligent commentary.
It was intelligent. It was funny. It was sad at times. They cried. They just had to get out.
Every spectrum of emotions. Speaking of a spectrum of emotions, Tennessee fans, we're sorry. We know it's been a tough week for you.
Oh yeah. You had to know deep down you're not getting Chucky. I'm sorry, that was never going to happen.
You put your eggs in that one a little bit too much, and it's strangely reminiscent of Tennessee's last coaching search,
right?
When pretty much everybody turned them down. I know we have an ongoing disagreement about which job is better, Tennessee or Auburn. I felt a little bit of vindication based on the events of this week. You may argue with me on that one, but Tennessee does have a coach now.
Right.
They do.
And if you want to see what we really think about it, www.outputtingourcoverage.wordpress.com. We have an exchange going right now on Andy's last post, so you can see that.
Yes, but Butch Jones, I think he's actually going to turn out to be a pretty good hire for
I think so. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you got to – I like to use a couple of examples in these situations. UCLA last year went through the same ringer, had to kind of go out on a limb and pick up Jim Elmora.
Right.
Completely turned that program around this year.
He is also clinically insane.
He's clinically crazy.
But he has turned that program around.
And then you can use the example of Alabama, too. Rich Rodriguez was all set to come to Alabama, turned him down at the last second. Then you bring in Nick Saban.
I think Saban's worked out okay.
I think that worked out. I mean, that's a little bit of a different situation. You weren't really settling for Saban. I think at that point you're just kind of ratcheting up the money and saying whatever it takes.
But if you just look at Butch Jones and where he's been, if there's anybody who can take a program and make them winners pretty quickly. I think maybe Butch Jones has got the resume for
Yeah.
it. He won at Eastern Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at that. I think maybe a possible knock on him, it's difficult to say if this is true or not, is that he's not so much a builder as he is a maintainer. He's
That's
followed
true.
Brian Kelly at
Twice.
his past 2 stops,
Yeah.
who Brian Kelly had kind of built things up. So it's tough to know. I mean, he didn't really get a chance to build it, so you can't. I mean, you could say the same thing about Malzahn at Arkansas State, because Hugh Freeze had already kind of built
They were
it up.
10-1 the year before, but at the same time, if you remember, when Cincinnati went undefeated and got just demolished by Florida in what was it, the Sugar Bowl?
Yeah.
That year, their team had 32 seniors.
Yeah.
32 seniors. He
That's
lost
true.
a ton of talent,
That's true.
and then they came back. They were 4-9 the first year, and then they started a streak where he's like 27-7 in the last couple of years.
You can look at this a couple of different ways. Obviously, he's not an elite level hire that is just going to turn things around for Tennessee in an instant. If he can get some solid recruiters in there, obviously that'll help. It helps that they're in the SEC East. They don't have to play quite as tough a competition, but we say he'll be a good hire. I'm not sure he's the guy that can get Tennessee back into BCS bowls or anything. But
I don't know. He's not a name, but I think when we were talking about developers and true coaches, I think he's probably up there with them.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe the ceiling for him is 10 wins, somewhere in there.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough to say in the East.
I mean, I was about to say the East. Florida looks like they're going to be better, but we don't know. Nobody really knows what South Carolina is going to do in the next couple of years. And Georgia, you don't know what they're going to do this year.
Right.
I mean, Georgia's a wild card. So you have down years from everybody. You never know what Tennessee can do.
Right. So the nightmare of the Tennessee coaching search is over. Seemingly all of the SEC coaching searches are over at this point.
Okay, so with that being said, we've got Kentucky. Go ahead and just list the coaches as I go. Kentucky.
Mark Stoops.
Tennessee.
Butch Jones.
Okay, we've got Auburn.
Gus Malzahn.
And Arkansas.
Brett Bielema.
Who was the best hire?
Ooh, that's a tough question, actually. I mean, if you're doing it on a relative scale, I might even go with Mark Stoops.
Mark Stoops. I really think Kentucky knocked it out of the ballpark with that one, striking first.
Obviously, it's a relative scale. He's not going to win Kentucky a national championship.
He's not, but I think he can get them out of their slump. I really think it's Bielema. I really think that they knocked that one out of the park. And nobody's going to agree with me, and that's fine, but we'll just see in about 2 or 3 years whether this is a good call, bad call. I really think he's going to have success there.
I'm glad I could cop out there on Mark Stoops because I don't want to put a vote of confidence or a vote of no confidence in Malzahn right now.
Right.
I don't really want to take a position yet.
Yeah, and that's fine. You can reserve yourself.
It's tough to tell, but I will take a position and disagree with you on Bielema just because I don't think it's going to work, but it'll be an interesting one to watch.
It will.
For sure. So, all right, we're going to take another very quick break. On the other side, we're going to talk about if we could do the bowls ourselves.
I'm so excited about this.
What we would choose. Because there are some decent bowl games out there this year, but there are some real clunkers.
I really personally believe if I had money and I had to pay for each event, there are not 4 watchable games in the bowls all year.
But
and that includes the national
We're about to
championship
create
game.
some watchable matchups here and there. Very watchable. So you want to stick around for that here on the other side of outputting our coverage.
We're back, don't know what we're talking about. 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 We're back, here we go. No more commercials. Here we go. Always talking stuff. We're back, don't know what we're talking about, but we're back. Time for the show,
All right, we are back here on Outputting Our Coverage. It's a pretty well-known fact that the bowls are quite hamstrung by conference affiliations and money grabs and things of that nature. It's about as far from a free market as you could possibly get.
It is. In one of my bowl pick'ems, my name is literally I Hate Affiliations.
Yes.
It makes for a terrible bowl season. I would not pay to see any of these games except maybe the national championship and one other. I like the Texas A&M Oklahoma matchup. I think
good.
I think they got that one right. But we're going to have the 2012-2013 Andy and David Bowl Extravaganza.
Yes.
And if you were to ask us, we think you would pay to watch all of these games. I would personally pay to watch all the games that we have coming up.
All right.
So you take the first one?
Yeah, let's go through a couple of these here. We'll start with the BCS Bowls. If we got more time, then we'll make up some matchups for the other one. Let's start with what I would consider the worst of the BCS Bowls, just in terms of tradition and history. Fiesta.
Yeah, I don't. Who's even in the Fiesta?
I'm not sure who is in the Fiesta Bowl
Right.
at the current moment. But
It's Oregon, Kansas State. How did they get the best matchup out of all of them?
now, see what I would do, and I would keep Oregon in there. I'm
Right.
okay with that one, but I would like to see him play Georgia.
Okay, now that's interesting. I would probably say if I had to see him play an SEC team, I'd like to see him play Florida.
Okay.
Just because of that defense back there.
Okay, yeah, I'm okay with that too. But
And Georgia got ransacked against the run against Alabama.
Yeah.
It's a different type of running game.
it is. So, Georgia deserves to be in a BCS game somewhere.
Definitely. And if there are no affiliations, we can put as many SEC teams in there as we want.
Yes, we absolutely can. So that's where I'm going, Fiesta.
Okay, Fiesta, I would probably go Oregon, Florida.
Okay, yeah, I'm good with that. Let's go to the Orange Bowl now.
The Orange Bowl. Right now you have Northern Illinois and Florida State.
Pretty much the worst BCS matchup of all time. If you're a Florida State fan, this is an incredibly precarious scenario. If you win, you were supposed to. If you lose, you lost to Northern Illinois.
Right, yeah, and it's just...
I mean, you might as well just not show up. Just don't play.
It might be the worst matchup of all time. Who do you have in here?
I'm going to keep Florida State just because it's really hard to just start from nowhere. So I'm just
It
trying
is.
to modify things here. I want to see Florida State and Texas A&M. Let's pop another SEC team in.
Now that would be interesting.
Yes.
I am about to pull out what I think could be the best matchup on paper that could exist this year. I would pay so much money to watch this game. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Georgia,
Okay.
Stanford.
Oh, yeah.
No one would walk away from that game alive.
That would be-
They would kill each other.
That would be excellent.
I would love to watch that game with the downhill running schemes of both and the kind of tough defense. I would watch that game.
Okay, so we got our Orange Bowl matchups there. Let's move on to the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl.
The Rose Bowl, yeah, it's just kind of pitiful. Right now, you have Wisconsin in there
Yeah,
against
this is just
Stanford.
Shameful.
It's terrible.
I'm going to keep Stanford, and I'm going to throw Kansas State in there against them.
Okay,
think
you're
that
going to
might
put
be
K-State in there.
decent.
I am actually going to move Florida. I have K-State in there, but I'm going to make them play Florida State. I think the athleticism against with Florida State against the kind of just don't turn the ball over, old school, down your throat running game of Kansas State. I think that would kind of be a nice juxtaposition.
Okay. I'm on board with that one. Obviously, I would leave the national championship as is.
Right, I don't touch that one.
You can't mess with that one. Let's check out a couple other bowls. Let's
Okay.
go to the Cotton Bowl. What
Cotton
would you
Bowl.
do with that
Now
one?
this one's interesting. I said earlier I think that the Texas A&M Oklahoma game they really hit it on the head. However, I would not put them together. Here's another game that I would pay to see because I think 3,000 points is a possibility in this game.
Okay.
Texas A&M, Oklahoma State.
Oh wow,
You could have
That'd be nuts.
You could have 9,000 points scored in that game.
that would be nuts. You know what I did? I left out the Sugar Bowl.
Oh, okay.
How did I? Oh, it's because it's the Champions Bowl now. That's
Really?
why
That's
I got confused by the name. So, who we got in the Sugar Bowl?
The Sugar
right
Bowl
now?
is right now Louisville and Florida. Terrible matchup.
That's awful. Let's make that Florida and Oklahoma.
I like
about
Florida, Oklahoma, but I think I've already used Florida. How about I'm going to make it Oklahoma, South Carolina.
Okay, I'm
So I
on
think
board with that
That'd
one.
be an interesting one.
I'm on board with that one. Let's move on to the Outback Bowl.
Okay, the Outback Bowl. We're not really sure who's playing in that one yet, but it's terrible. We're just going to go ahead and say it's a terrible game.
Yeah.
It's South Carolina, Michigan.
What do you think about Oregon State and Michigan?
I like that. Oregon State, kind of a tough defense, throw it out, and Michigan is just going to run at you every way they can. That's an interesting matchup. I like that one.
My thoughts on picking these games, just as I picked the Pick 10, if I look at this game and I want to pick both teams, it's going on the Pick 10.
Okay,
Just
there
like
you go.
if I want to pick both teams, it's going in the bowl.
That makes
matchup
sense.
here.
I like that.
All right.
Okay, what do you think about LSU? What's a good matchup for LSU?
I really like the matchup that LSU already has.
LSU
I like
Clemson's
Clemson
interesting.
LSU. I think that's going to be a good game.
Although we
but-
did see Clemson get dismantled by South Carolina.
Yeah, another team maybe I'd like to see them play.
LSU, I would like to see LSU play somebody who's kind of on the same level as getting lucky a lot and kind of winning when maybe they shouldn't.
Boise State?
Boise State
That'd
could
be
be
a
an
good
interesting
one.
one, but I'm going to say UCLA.
Okay, I like that.
I think
like that.
LSU, UCLA, different styles. That'd be pretty neat.
Okay.
How about USC? Do you have anybody for USC?
Yeah,
to
I
play?
got them in the Sun Bowl versus Northwestern.
Okay, now that'd be really interesting. I think it'd be interesting to see USC, who's kind of battered on both lines, can't really stop the run or do anything like that, play Mississippi State.
That'd be a good one.
I think that would be pretty interesting.
Be real good. Yep. Although we did find out that Mississippi State might be a little overrated.
That's
for the end
true.
of the season,
That's true.
So we're not sure.
Now they're playing Northwestern, who you obviously, I mean, you can't pick either one of those teams with any confidence.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough matchup there. What about the little guys? That we got to have some bowls for little guys.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm choosing the Pinstripe Bowl as a designated little guy bowl.
West Virginia, Syracuse right now, ain't it?
Yeah, I mean, really, the way I think it should work, we should have maybe like 10 bowls for major teams,
right?
And then maybe 2 or 3 bowls for littler guy teams.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I've chosen 2. I've gone ahead and just taken the liberty of choosing 2 little guy bowls. One of which I'm designating the Pinstripe Bowl, and the other one the Hawaii Bowl. Let's give them a good trip.
I like it.
Pinstripe Bowl, just because I can never keep these teams straight, and I want them to play each other, so I can figure out who's better. San Jose State and San Diego State.
Nice.
Just a matchup of the Sands.
Yeah, I cannot figure those 2 teams out. Okay, I've got another one for you, kind of a little team, although one of them is not so little. They're trying to get on the rise again from a bigger conference. Texas Tech, Tommy Tuberville.
Okay.
They like to score some points, right?
They do. Yeah.
I'm going to pick somebody who's not even in a bowl. And it's not Auburn. That I don't think that would be any good. La Tech.
Ooh.
They got a snub from a bowl because they were trying to hold out for a better bowl. They're 9-3. They almost beat Texas A&M in a wild shootout. It was 60-53.
It'd be a good one.
I think La Tech, Texas Tech would be interesting.
Is their coach still going to be there, Sonny Dykes?
No, he's gone probably before the bowl comes.
Okay. Well, yeah, it'll still be a good matchup. Another little guy matchup I think I'd like to see, although this is another one that's kind of dampened by a coach leaving, Utah State and Arkansas State.
Oh, yeah,
I think
definitely.
that'd be a pretty good matchup there.
That'd be a good one. How about Ball State, who actually has had a really underrated year? They're 9-3. They only have a couple losses against maybe a Boise State, who lost 2 that they probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, you just never know. So
I like pitting the bigger schools against the littler schools. I think
it makes for an interesting story, kind of like your Boise versus Oklahoma game from a few years ago. So you never quite know what you're going to get there. One thing's for sure. You'll watch the games because they're on, but they're not nearly as good as they could have been.
Yeah,
it's just sad. But despite all that, next week we will be doing a full real bowl preview, talking about the actual horrible selections.
If you have not looked at the bowls, if you know nothing about them, tune in because you will know so much more than you ever wanted to know about some teams you've probably never heard of.
That's right. But just think of it as preparation for next year. If you start learning about these teams now, we may even try to get into some like who's returning for what teams.
Yeah,
next year.
and how much better are you going to be at the Pick 10? How much better will you be at the bowl pick?
Absolutely. That's how it goes. So we'll be back next week, regular time, here on Outputting our coverage. Thanks for tuning in.